Hello, and thank you for joining us on Perspectives. My name is David Schoenem, and I'm your host here. Today we're going to take a look at a story that we've looked at before a couple of times over the course of the last couple of years. It's a story that involves a citizen who took on City Hall, and she's learned a lot in the process, and we're going to share some of that information today. I'm here with Laurie Ortolano. Laurie, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Always nice to be back.
It's great to have you here. We've talked a lot about your ordeal or your adventure, depends how you want to look at it, in taking on City Hall. The old adage, you can't fight City Hall. Well, you fought and you've done fairly well, I would say, but it's not without paying a price.
Exactly, both pain and price. So it's been a pretty challenging undertaking. I've learned a lot. I've been disappointed a lot. I've taken a little, I backed off from going to board meetings because I found the environment was just so hostile and personally attacking. I couldn't go in there anymore.
You faced a lot of intimidation.
I did, and it got so overwhelming in the last couple of months and so damaging that I sort of just pushed my way out of there. I can't go back in. So, and it frustrates me that I couldn't get my 3 minutes of public comment time without being interrupted.
Yeah.
They were just so disrespectful to your rights to be able to speak. And I think there's more and more cases coming out, I'm reading across the country, on people going to court and challenging these constitutional rights to freedom of speech, and they're doing well. And I do have a federal case filed, and hopefully we can get some of this aired and maybe get speech opened up in Nashua, because that's a problem.
Let me interject one thing here. I want to just let people know that I was on the Board of Aldermen from 2013 to 2017. And at that time, there were no time limits on speaking. You could stand at the microphone prior to the meeting. A lot of times people spoke about things that weren't germane to that meeting, but that was generally okay, even though you're not supposed to. But that's okay. They could talk about whatever they wanted to. And certainly at the end of the meeting, during public comment, they could say anything that they wanted to, really for as long as they wanted to.
Right.
And one of the things I liked best about those aldermanic meetings was that period of public comment.
Right.
Because you can hear what people say. My view on all this is that we can't always do what everybody wants.
Right.
But if people feel that they can speak and are being heard,
right,
generally speaking, they're going to go home and be happy with the city that they live in.
Exactly.
But if they feel that they're stifled, that no one listens, they're going to feel disappointed in the city that they live in.
Definitely.
So all of these time restraints, the 3 minutes or not allowing, have occurred really since 2017.
Right.
And when did you first begin?
2018.
2018.
It changed in 2019. 2019 is when they started introducing changes, and they've done it for essentially 3 years.
And they were responding to the pressure that you put on them.
Exactly.
I'm convinced.
Oh, definitely. Because I was the one going primarily.
Right.
There were a few more people, but they were, they generally had a policy that was wrapped around, I think, 15 minutes, but it could be adjusted. And even now, attendance is so low. There's just almost nobody coming out publicly. The last Board of Aldermen meeting, 3 people, citizens spoke. But prior to that, it's been about a month since I've gone to one. There was virtually nobody has come out at all. So they're not faced with people being in there. And then for the last 6 months that I've been going, usually I go to finance, assessing, budget, infrastructure, planning and economic developing, and alderman. That's my little cache of what I go to. Occasionally a downtown improvement committee on Friday morning. I attended my first TIF meeting. But those 6 are what I primarily focus on. It's where the money is, it's where spending is, and it's what I kind of want to track. So in many of those meetings, I'm the only one there. Yeah. And if I were to stand up, and I've asked, where I have 3 minutes, but there's a couple other topics I want to cover, and I've asked if I could have more than 3, the answer is always no. Yeah. Absolutely not. Even if there's nobody there and they have a 15-minute allotment of time.
Yeah, that would never have happened.
Right. And
earlier.
The one that sticks out so vividly in my mind was going to a Board of Public Works meeting last year. The mayor was heavily campaigning on the police commission charter change, and he's the chair of the Board of Public Works. So he canceled 2 meetings in a row. Board of Public Works has a lot of business, and he canceled 2. So they weren't run. So everything got rolled into, I believe, the December meeting. They had an agenda that had probably 30 spending items on it, tens of millions of dollars. And I had wanted to address some of them. And I wanted to address them in October, canceled November, canceled December. The list just built. When I went to the microphone and I said, could I have some additional time? The meetings have been canceled and there's, 20, 30 spending items on this agenda. I'd like to cover some of these. The mayor said no.
Yeah. He certainly doesn't want to hear.
He didn't want to hear, and the Board of Aldermen doesn't want to hear.
No.
And they're using that chamber to really beat up citizens that they don't agree with.
And I want to point out, too, that your quest began just looking for information.
That's it.
And that's what it's been all this time. You're looking for information. So you filed a lot of right to knows because the information's simply not forthcoming.
No.
But they don't want to answer. I think they don't want to answer because they don't have ansers.
I think
they really don't.
No, I think they're so discombobulated in there.
Yeah.
They don't have good processes in place. And I think deliberately have not had good processes in place because they've been more focused on trying to destroy the individual who's looking for it rather than address the matter. Because I think they feel that they could push the person away. They often feel they can just take a person, shove them out of the scene, especially if they're asking good questions, really diminish them with some solid personal attacks, and then they won't come back. But I came back because our property assessment was ridiculous, and it just needed to be fixed.
Yeah.
And I remember back in 2019 saying to my husband, maybe we should just get out of here and move. But we would have to take like $100,000 loss on the house to do it because the assessment was wrong. We had 2 realtors come in. They were like, you got to get this abated. And we had really overpaid for the house. So there was just no reason why the assessment couldn't be fixed, and they just wouldn't do it.
They just wouldn't
They wouldn't do it. And
it's amazing how much effort they put into just not doing it. It would have been far easier
if they'd just done
to just do it.
Right.
And with all of these, you've been in court many times.
Yeah.
They've had to come and answer to you in court.
Right.
They've been told by the judge to pay some of your court costs.
Right.
But they double down and triple down on pushing you away rather than just solving the problem.
And
it's astounding to me.
And they keep doing it even now. Even, every time there's another action taken, they become even more punishing. And what I have found is the state agencies are so disappointing. They're so narrow. Their lane is very narrow. The scope of what they do is narrow. And even though you believe you could call different agencies, a county commissioner, a county sheriff's office, or the county office, prosecutor's office, the attorney general's office does not have a municipal division. So, which is, to me, needed now. And so any calls up there, Laura Calhoun and I were emailing and contacting them about all these right-to-know issues because there were so many of them. Can't you do something? And we got numerous emails back saying, you have to use the courts. Go through 91A and the remedy of 91A. We're hands off.
So they weren't pushing you aside. They were just acknowledging that, listen, we don't have the jurisdiction here.
Right. No
and
municipal.
They wanted to provide help, and the help was guidance.
Right. And what I find is I'm reading more and more in the newspaper about attorney general's offices from other states writing memos, pushing back on school boards that are overreaching, pushing back on towns. They produce memos and say, kind of knock it off, cautionary messages. Our attorney general's office doesn't do that. Now, what was disappointing to me is the cases that I won in Superior Court during the trials, the 3 right-to-know cases, the city has appealed all of them to the Supreme Court. So they would like the rulings overturned. And the first briefing was due and filed in September. The city filed, I think, the beginning of August, and then I filed in September. And the city was able to convince the Attorney General's office to write an amicus brief in support of the city to not give my records, which was so disappointing because my request was so minimal. So Judge Temple ordered that the city retrieve these backup tapes and give me the records off the backup tapes because the IT guy came in and says it takes 2 hours to retrieve the information off the backup tapes. And the court ruled that, hey, 2 hours is nothing, small amount of time. And the IT guy said, I don't even have to sit there for the 2 hours. Once I load the tape and it's chugging away, converting the ones and zeros back to readable data, I can go off and do something. So I figure for a cost of about $75, I can get the tape.
Simple enough.
Simple enough. The city appealed that to the Supreme Court and said we shouldn't have to do that. It would create a cascade of issues for the city. We would be flooded with backup requests. Well, do you know that happened in March of 2021 was when that was filed. It's, more than 18 months ago, 20 months ago. And having a discussion about and asking several people in City Hall how many right to knows have been filed to ask for backup tape material. You know how many there have been?
How many? 0.
There's been no crisis.
No, it's a manufactured crisis.
They make it up and they write that.
They make it up in order to put pressure,
right,
to intimidate people, to scam away. You're not the only person who's been intimidated. I was talking, I saw a video that Marilyn Todd put together. She was doing some right to know, and she was arrested in the parking lot for City Hall for trespassing. That's pure intimidation. Pure intimidation.
Yeah, her situation was terrible. It was traumatic for me because I had been arrested the month before. And then when it happened to her, I didn't know her from a hole in the wall, but it was amazing how much it impacted me, her arrest, because it just brought a flood of memories about what a horrible experience that was for me.
Right.
And that it was happening to another citizen, and that a mother with a child. And it happened, the whole issue happened in City Hall by the clerk's office, translated out to the parking lot. They said she was disruptive and yelling. None of that really mattered to me. She was there trying to get information, and I just thought it was taken too far. She held firm that she was not going to plead that out at all. And the day of her trial, the police dropped all the charges. So, and then it happened with Alicia Houston in sort of an outburst in a school board meeting where she got frustrated and spoke out of turn, not in public comment. And I recall, the police were looking for her and everyone was saying she's going to get arrested. The school boards asked for her to be arrested. I wrote the lengthiest email, I think, to the chief, the commissioners, and said, please let level heads prevail here. Yeah. This should not be an arrestable offense. I don't want to see us arresting citizens. It happened to me. It was wholly horrible, uncomfortable, terrible. Yeah. And I didn't want to see it done. And they did not go after her at all. That's good. So I was happy with that. And since then, I think cooler heads have prevailed, except for me. The city has continued to fight to arrest me. And on July 22nd, Attorney Bolton tried to have me arrested in City Hall again.
For what? Wait, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it happened.
That was this year, July 22nd this year.
I was up there trying to get a email that they had sent to me that I couldn't retrieve through a portal that they make you go through to get emails. And I went upstairs to talk to Nick Meiservich, who's on the 3rd floor of City Hall, along with the legal office. The email was from the legal office. And nobody in IT answered. I tried to knock on the door to see what was going on with this portal, but nobody was there. It was a Friday afternoon around 11:30, 11:45. So I went around the hallway area, and the legal office has a plaque on the wall with a phone number. So I had my arrest and my violation, which was pled to a violation, which I'm sorry I pled it. I'm so sorry I did in a way, but I also feel the police wouldn't have backed down on me because the city was just so intent to arrest me. I was told later by the prosecutor that when it was pled to a violation, Attorney Bolton did not agree with it. He wanted the maximum fine and jail time. He wanted the misdemeanor A with jail time. He did not agree with any police reduced term. So I knew the city at that point, and I learned that months later from Kinney, that those were the wishes of Attorney Bolton. So that kind of, concerned me. And then I bought a police body cam after February because I had 2 incidences in February where they tried to arrest me again. And I was worried. I was getting really worried. So I bought this police body cam, and when I went Friday on July 22nd, I was getting ready to go up to the lake, and I forgot to put my body cam on. So I go to City Hall, and I don't have it on. My husband's at home waiting for us to leave. And Attorney Bolton saw me in the hallway. He opened the door to, I think, come out for lunch, and he was enraged. He just started hollering that you can't be here, You're trespassing. I'll have you arrested. Leave now. I was stunned. And I was actually on the phone with the clerk, Manuela, in his office, saying to her, I can't print this email. Can you just print it and put it in the mail basket, which is right outside the hallway on the wall? It's an illegal mail basket. Actually, while I was talking to her, I was kind of pacing on the third floor area, and I heard the door open. So I spun around because I thought it was her. I thought it was her coming with the email. It was Attorney Bolton. And he was furious when he saw me. So when he yelled, the clerk inside obviously could hear him yell. She hung up the phone right away. She was scared. And I said, Attorney Bolton, I'm just talking to Manuela to get an email. He went in a tirade. You're not allowed to call our office. You're not allowed to talk to Manuela. You don't talk to anyone. You don't speak to anyone. You don't ask for anything. Leave now or I'll have you arrested. I dialed 911 immediately.
Yeah.
So I got the state police, and I just said, I'm being accosted by verbally attacked by the Corporation Counsel for the City of Nashua on the third floor of City Hall, and I need assistance because I was convinced he was going to arrest me at that point. It happened in just like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So police came. Really, 2 officers came. They thought it was pretty ridiculous. I told them how I couldn't get my information. They said, you have no standing orders. There's nothing holding you back. You're not under, you can knock on that legal door. There's nothing there, no restrictions. I said, well, I never knock on, I don't knock on the legal door because he's so inflammatory.
Yeah.
Not that I should be treated differently, but I'm not looking to pick a fight.
No.
So, and actually, when I called on July 22nd, I don't think I had called the legal office in 4 or 5 months. It's not like I call them. So, yeah, the police went inside to talk to him. They waited for a sergeant, and he wanted me arrested. He asked, did Laurie Ortolano talk to you outside? And they said, yes, she did. And he said, did you arrest her? I want her arrested. And it rolled from there. And the police officer said, well, we can't just arrest her. We have to investigate. Show us what she did. And I waited 10 days to get the report. I was really upset because I wasn't certain if he had the power to initiate that arrest from the RSA.
He thought he did.
He did. And but the police wrote it up and said there was no basis for it. They said they tried to reason with him and there was no reasoning with him. That he insisted that when they asked him, you know, who can be up here on the third floor, it's an open public space.
Right.
He said everyone but her. When they asked him who can call into the legal office, he said everyone but her. So I filed that with the Professional Conduct Committee, a formal complaint against him. And one of the channels that you can deal with attorneys that you think are not operating correctly, and I think Attorney Bolton and Attorney Leonard are not operating within their professional duties, is to file complaints with a group called the Professional Conduct Committee. It's the Attorney Discipline Office, the Attorney Discipline System, and they're a branch of the Supreme Court. They work under the Supreme Court. And that has been the most disappointing, frustrating process you can ever imagine.
Really?
It's
Protecting
terrible.
their own or what?
Yes. You know, first of all, Attorney Bolton has lawyered up, so he's got Attorney Hilliard representing him on my complaint. And he did 2 years ago. I filed on him. And I filed on him for running up my legal costs. Okay? He was making my legal bills go up. And by dumping a bunch of right-to-know requests or information on my lawyer that wasn't relevant to my suit. And when I contacted him on it and said, stop doing it, he said, hey, you can sit with your lawyer and go through all the emails and pick and choose which ones apply. Well, that costs money.
Yeah.
So I was like, no.
Yeah.
And there were a couple other things he did. He sort of ambushed me, him and Kim Kleiner, one day and put me in the legal office. I didn't even know I was in the legal office, and grilled me down after I had that investigator that I hired to deal with the assessor who was sleeping on the job. I was supposed to go to a meeting on assessing. I ended up on the third floor in the legal office being interviewed by Attorney Bolton, and both Kleiner and he thought my report was a joke. Just poorly done, no credibility, nothing there. So it was how they operated. I filed a claim that as an attorney he should not have pulled me into that office without my attorney being present. And I filed a claim that he was improperly running up my legal bills. I lost. They wrote back and said that there wasn't any real evidence to do anything about it. But it taught me a lesson, and it taught me that these lawyers circle the wagon for themselves. Mm. And they will let citizens bear the burden of these very high legal fees because they're not really following any rules. They'll go after the individual lawyer. You know what they'll go after? They'll go after inappropriate sex with a client, and they'll go after improper billing if they find a billing problem. And there's a lot of billing problems with lawyers, and I've discovered anyway, a lot of them across the board. But they won't go after a municipality that is improperly using taxpayer money. I bet you they have never investigated a municipal office for misuse of taxpayer dollars. Because a municipal office doesn't have to track attorney's fees. They don't have to track cases. That legal office would tell you that I have spent more than $1 million of city money on legal fees for them.
Yeah, it would have cost them how much to just give you the information.
And be reasonable.
And just be done with it.
But they would say, I've spent $1 million. And my worry was always that they were going to convince the judge that it was my fault. My early cases went terrible in there. And I feel like the city circled the wagon on me. You know, Mayor Donchis was publicly talking how he goes to mayor meetings, he goes up to the state, he tells them about me. He was saying publicly, they can't believe what this lady's doing. You know, Trish Clee talked openly about how all of the people at the State House, you know, Republicans and Democrats alike, they can't believe what she's doing, what's gone on down here. So they have very effectively painted a picture of, you know, some crazy out of control lady who, you know, harmed them. I mean, Trish describes me as a bully, a hater, a terrorist, a insurrectionist. I mean, they put it all out there.
Ultimately, people are going to see through Trish Clee.
I hope so.
And really, I think that you're going to be okay. I don't think they're really convincing as many people as you think. I think that they're convincing their audience that there's something wrong with them.
Right.
I think that's what's really happening.
Hopefully. So this attorney discipline system, I failed on the first one, and I realized that the city's going to be able to run my fees up any way they want. So I worked with lawyers on that big case. It was incredibly expensive, almost $250,000. And then I cut it off because there was easily another $150,000, $200,000 to spend. I have a ruling. They took me up to the Supreme Court. That case was so large that the Supreme Court appeal was going to cost me $100,000 to have a lawyer do it. The fighting over the invoices and what's going on in court right now was going to cost me $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And then if I went up there, it comes back down to be worked on more. So it was just never-ending bills, and I could not justify spending that money. But I started writing a lot of complaints up to the PCC against Bolton, Leonard, and this attorney who got involved with the situation, Brian Cullen. You know, my arrest was appealed, was discharged, and it was reduced to a violation, and the court discharged it in maybe June or so. So I was free to go for an annulment to get it off my record completely. I filed for the annulment. Months later, the city, through Brian Cullen, wrote a motion to the court, to the district court, requesting that they be heard on my annulment. They wanted to intervene because they said I gave untruthful information to the police about my request for the annulment, and that I had not been adequately rehabilitated to serve, you know, and that I was, you know, basically a threat to the welfare of the citizens of Nashua.
I don't think you're a threat to the welfare of the citizens of Nashua.
And
you are an advocate for the citizens of Nashua.
It was so disappointing to see what's happened, and there's a whole underlying story in there that could be another show. But I have filed a lot of complaints up there, and what I'm noticing is there's a citizen. First of all, I can't get representation from a lawyer to help me on these cases because lawyers don't like snitching on lawyers. So I don't have any representation. I'm writing them on my own. They send you this book. It's this nice tiny print of all the rules and regulations and what you can do, and then you've got all the codes that you can apply, and you have to write it up, apply the rules that are broken, and submit it. And I think a lot of citizens aren't good enough writers to do it.
Yeah.
They don't know the rules well enough. The lawyers lawyer up. Hilliard's specialty is defending lawyers who are tagged for disciplinary action. Mm-hmm. So they lawyer up, you sit there with nothing. You write these things. They rarely go to a committee or a hearing. The one on Bolton is moved forth to a complaint screening committee, but I look at these names. I think this is the guy who did an appraisal for me. And this is another guy called an attorney for help.
It's a small community.
I've had people say to me, it's going to be dropped and you're going to get nowhere. Mm. You'll be lucky. So I must have thrown 6 up there. Mm. One with Leonard, I just got back that they dismissed it because they claimed in 2021 I had already filed the complaint. I filed it under a different set of circumstances. I resurrected it under a new set of circumstances, and they wouldn't hear it. Hmm. So they dropped it. So it's a maddening process.
Yeah, it is. But you've stuck with it, and I'm grateful for that. I think a lot of people at home are grateful too. Because they're not going into these meetings, and they see what's happened to you, and they're not going to do it. They're not going to stand up at the microphone and put themselves through this.
They called me and said, we don't want to. They don't want
to do it. And
put down.
But you've stuck it out, and I think they're grateful for that. And I'm pleased to see it too, because it's hard to fight City Hall.
Oh, God.
But I think it's worth it, because what happens in place of a fight is an escalation of a grab for power, really.
Oh.
And this intimidation that costs a lot of money, and it could drive people out of town, and it hurts the community.
It does.
Getting back to people feeling comfortable about living in the city they live in.
Right. When
this kind of thing happens, and if anyone knows about it, they can't feel comfortable about what's happening to their neighbors and fellow citizens.
No.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and talking about. We're out of time here already.
Yeah, it goes so fast.
We'll have to have you come in again. I would like to follow up some more, because we talked about the ombudsman thing in the beginning.
I'd love to talk to you about
that. To get to that point. So that sounds like the state is trying to staff up so that a citizen has some place to go.
Low cost place to bring complaints in.
Right.
I haven't been able to get information, but we could talk about that. That could be a valuable service for all of us.
Well, sometimes you kind of just go where the conversation goes, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming in.
Yes.
And folks, I want to thank you for tuning in as well. I'm very glad to have you here. We've been talking with Laurie Ortolano, a concerned citizen here in the city of Nashua who's taking on City Hall. I hope that you will consider attending some of these meetings and maybe pursuing some of your own right to know if you're up to it. But you can always reach out here if you have any issues that you'd like us to take on with them as well. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.